Asian, hi again. When I was telling you the story, all of a sudden YouTube crashed and it didn't let me resume the live stream. So thanks for finding me here. So let's wait for a minute. Hopefully the others will find us here as well. If not, we're gonna continue with the tour. It looks like it's gonna be a beautiful day today, finally. After the heavy rain yesterday, it's gonna be real beautiful. So let's continue. So I was interrupted when I was telling you the story of the Cossacks and why they fled. And that divide of people between Catholics and Eastern Orthodox. So in the second half of the 14th century, this territory became part of the Polish kingdom. And gradually, they started pushing the Catholic faith. They started building here Catholic churches, and of course, the Catholic cathedral was built in Przemysl, at first in Gothic style. Some 200 years later, it was redecorated in the Baroque style, and now you are looking at the Baroque facade of this cathedral. But at heart, the nave is Gothic. So let's go in. And all these buildings surrounding the cathedral are part of the diocese or archdiocese of Przemysl. And the whole the second. Belong to the archdiocese. I've refreshed, but it should get better now. Is it better now? Excellent. So I hope you were able to see the interiors of the cathedral and the painting dedicated to the Ulma family. The painting dedicated to the Ulma family, the whole family, and it's the only Polish family which was beautified as the family, together with all of its members, all of the kids. So the family was beautified at the end of the 20th century. They were murdered by the Nazis together with the Jews who they were hiding in the cellar of their house. So today their house, located in a village in this region, has been turned into the museum dedicated to all of the non-Jewish residents of Poland, residents of this region, who were hiding the Jews and helping the Jews during the Second World War. So that's what that painting was about. Now let's go back to the story of the cathedral. At the end of the 17th century, it was redecorated in the Baroque style, and that's when it got its standalone bell tower. So today, when the tower is open, you can buy a separate ticket and climb to the top of the tower to enjoy the beautiful views of this town. And looking at this cathedral, which is a Catholic cathedral, you can easily guess that the regional archdiocese was quite wealthy. And the town was wealthy as well up until the 17th century. The golden age of Przemysl was the golden age of Poland that started in the 14th century and ended at the late 16th century. And that was the time when Przemysl continued being located on that important trading route which crossed Europe west-east. This part of the trading route connected Krakow with Lvov and Kiev. And of course, the residents of this town profited from the location. So looking at this part of the nave here, you can tell that it belongs to the late Middle Ages, late 14th and 15th centuries. It boasts Gothic architecture. That was the time when the cathedral was just built. And now we're gonna be walking down Cathedral Street. That's the name of this road, Cathedral Street, from the Catholic Cathedral to the second one, which is Greek Catholic. And the spires of that church belong to the Greek Catholic Cathedral. So I told you that story about how the Polish nobles, including the king and the top Roman Catholic clergy, started pushing Catholicism onto people when this land was included into the Polish state. And there was quite a lot of resistance because people didn't want to change their faith. As a result, the top nobility and the top clergy came up with a compromise. And that compromise was the Greek Catholic Church. So when you're inside a Greek Catholic Church, you don't see the difference between the Eastern Orthodox or the Greek Catholic Church, because the liturgy is carried out in the Old Slavonic language, which was the language of the Eastern Orthodox Church, because the walls are decorated with the icons of the Eastern Orthodox saints, and the names of the saints are written in Cyrillic, in the Old Slavonic language, because it has the iconostas typical of the Eastern Orthodox churches. So for the commoners, while being inside the church, a Greek Catholic Church, they didn't see the difference, and that was good enough. But the Greek Catholic Church was under the Pope, under the Vatican, and that was good enough for the Catholic clergy here and for the nobles. So the compromise was established, and that compromise, religious compromise, became known as the Greek Catholic Church. And gradually, the Eastern Orthodox churches became Greek Catholic. I'm talking about the Eastern Orthodox churches in this region. And most of the communists became Greek Catholic. In the 17th century, this church was built by the Jesuits, the Catholics, as the Jesuit church. Cutting the long story short, and we talked about that story in detail during the previous walk, today it's a Greek Catholic cathedral. And the church building was given to the Greek Catholic parish by John Paul II. During yesterday's tour, we were inside this church, and we even attended the first few minutes of the service, Sunday service there. If you are interested, the recording will be available. Now let me try and go in, walk to the glass door and show you, give you a sneak peek at the interior. So today it's the mother cathedral of the Greek Catholic Church in Poland. The iconostas, which doesn't look any different from the iconostasis of the Eastern Orthodox churches. All these icons feature the Eastern Orthodox saints, and the names of the saints are written in Cyrillic language. The icons are painted following the Byzantine style, and that's the style of the icons in the Eastern Orthodox churches. So while being inside, you don't really see the difference. In reality, this church is under the Vatican. So in case it starts buffering, do let me know, but I will try and go in to give you a better view. During the service, these three doors are open and the priests go in and out. So the original interiors of this church were very different. When it was built by the Jesuits in the 17th century, it was a typical Baroque style Catholic church. When Poland was partitioned some 100 years later, at the late 18th century, the Austrian rulers, the Austrian government, closed all of the Catholic monasteries, convents here, including the Jesuits. Why did the Austrians do that? Because they were basically building their own power here. And they were afraid that they would experience a lot of opposition coming from the traditional Catholic Church here. And they didn't want that. On the other hand, they started playing friends with the ethnic minorities, non-Poles, who were living on those territories, because that was another instrument of another way to establish the Austrian power here. As part of that, the ethnic minorities were given equal rights with everybody else. And that was the time when this Jesuit church was given to the Greek Catholic parish. And it was part of the Greek Catholic parish up until the end of the Second World War. And then the Second World War ended, and the communist government was established. And they closed the Greek Catholic churches, and they sent, basically deported, I would say, the ethnic Ukrainians, who were the majority of the followers of these Greek Catholic churches, to the Soviet Ukraine, across the border, across the river. And the Soviet Ukraine deported Catholic priests from Soviet Ukraine to Poland. And a lot of the Catholic clergy moved back to Przemysl. So as a result, the Carmelites, who were deported from Western Ukraine to communist Poland, got that church, which originally had been built as the Carmelite Church. And the Greek Catholic Church was closed. And then in 1990s, after the collapse of the communist regime, John Paul II decided to give this church building back to the Greek Catholics. And it became the main Greek Catholic cathedral in this region. So that's the story. And from here we are walking to the third church, also designed in the Baroque style in the 17th century. And the architects who worked here at the time were Italians. And they were commissioned to build those churches in the Baroque style, which was the #1 architectural style at the time. And they had a vision to build a church building on each, level or the terrace of the town. So as a result, there is a cascade, let's put it that way, of churches in Przemysl. So this one is located on the top level. And still today, it belongs to the Carmelites. This second one, also designed in the Baroque style, which today is the Greek Catholic Cathedral, is the second church, located on the mid-level. And over there is the third one, also built in the Baroque style by the Franciscans, and it's at the lowest level. So now we are going uphill. So the Carmelite order was big in Poland since the Middle Ages. And all these different Catholic orders were quite powerful, they were important, they had a lot of property, up until the time the country was partitioned. And then when the Austrians included this region into the Austrian Empire, they closed most of the convents, orders, and monasteries, including this Carmelite order monastery. It's a convent, convent. And they gave the church building to the Greek Catholics because that was part of their strategy to establish their power in this region. And in the 19th century, the Greek Catholic community commissioned a Ukrainian architect to decorate this building with a dome, which was modeled on the domes of the Catholic churches in Rome. But then in the 20th century, when the church was given back to the Carmelites, they decided to destroy that Greek Catholic Ukrainian spirit of the church. The dome was knocked down and the tower was reconstructed. Let's see whether the door is open, because the interiors are quite beautiful. Yesterday we even managed to listen to a small concert, but I believe the church is closed. So if you have time, do join me for the afternoon walk, because that's when the church is gonna be open and we'll be able to go in. But let me try and push this door, and maybe a miracle will happen and it's gonna open. See? Here we are. It never hurts to try the door, even though it looks locked. Look at this beautiful pulpit. It was quite trendy in the late 17th century to design pulpits in the shape of a boat. The murals dedicated to the Carmelite nuns. And we are going out and gonna continue. So we are now almost at the highest level of the town. It's definitely the highest level of the old town. Only that hill with the castle where we started our tour is a little bit higher. And right here you can see, from here you can see the towers of the castle built by the King Casimir. The tower of the Catholic cathedral, together with the roof of the nave, the towers and the spires of the Greek Catholic cathedral, and the Franciscan church at the bottom, and that's where we are going next. The town continues on the second bank, on the opposite bank, on the eastern bank of the San River. Today, with a population of about 30,000 people, Przemysl is just a small provincial town in eastern Poland, located right on the border with Ukraine. So the golden age of this town happened at the same time as the golden age of the country, of the kingdom, from 14 till the end of the 16th century. The 17th century was quite challenging. It was the time of the wars in this region. So first, the war with Sweden, and that's when the town was occupied and largely destroyed by the Swedes. Then the Cossack uprising of Bogdan Khmelnytsky, when the regional Jews were massacred by the Cossacks, but not only. The Polish nobility was massacred by the Cossacks as well, and in general, all these wars led the country, this region and the town to a decline. The economy never recovered, and although they had the money to build those beautiful Baroque churches here, the economy was declining, and in the 18th century, Przemysl already became a small merchant town. That medieval trading route had fallen out of importance by that time, so it was a small merchant town on the eastern borders of the kingdom. Being a merchant town, it was quite culturally diverse. The majority of the population were ethnic Poles, but between 30 and 40% were the local Jews. There was still a lot of ethnic Ukrainians living here and Ruthenians. So basically the Ruthenians are the ethnic group, the group of people who consider themselves being more of the Eastern Slavic origin, to say it in simple words. Quite a few Armenians were here as well since the Middle Ages. And from here we are walking towards the Franciscan church, the third church built at the lowest level of the town on one big donation of the bishop. So looking at the grandeur, at the splendor of this church, and we're gonna go inside if the door is open, you can easily tell that the bishop was a rich man. So according to those Italian architects who were building the complex of these churches, they had that vision to build a Baroque church on each level of the town. On top, the Church of the Carmelites. In the middle, the Church of the Jesuits. And at first, that was the Church of the Jesuits. The cathedral was a little bit separate. And look from here, the nave of the cathedral boasts perfect Gothic architecture, the Baroque tower and the Gothic nave. And at the bottom, the Franciscan church. So look at this cute store. Ceramics. Pumpkins and squashes are real. So in the late 17th century, the bishop of Przemysl gave the money to build the Baroque style church building for the Franciscans. And obviously, all these Catholic orders were very important, particularly in Eastern Poland on the borderline with the realm of the Eastern Orthodox Church, because they reinforced Catholicism here. And still today, the facade of the building is decorated with the images of the Franciscans. Look at the splendor of this church, built on one big donation of the local bishop. And we are going in because it's absolutely beautiful inside. And oftentimes in this part of the country, the region located on the borderline, which was often invaded by the Mongols, the Tatars, who were not Christian, right? So oftentimes in the churches, you can see the images, the murals depicting the battles between the monks, the Catholic monks of different orders, and the Muslims, being the Tatars. Here's an example. And the last big invasion of the Tatars, who were the remnants of the Mongols, happened here in the same 17th century. A very challenging, a very difficult period in the history of this town. The period of the wars. And we've gradually walked down to the lowest, almost lowest level of the town. Over there is the center of the old town, main market square, the place of the regional markets. So, and what made this town rich? Trade. And the fact that it was located on that important trading route. So these are the main streets of the old town. And before we continue our walk towards the main market square, so let's look at the cascade of the churches. The Franciscans. Over there were the Jesuits. And in the very back, on top of the hill, were the Carmelites. The three Catholic orders in Przemysl, reinforcing the Catholic faith. So, and here we are on Main Market Square, which still today boasts a few Renaissance mansions. These were those medieval town mansions which belonged to the local elite, merchant elite. Look at this one, which preserved the Renaissance. That one, the Renaissance architecture. Those arcades, which were part of the Gothic buildings, originally built here, and inside the arcades was the trading space. And that's a typical architecture of the mansions built on those main market squares all over eastern Poland. The trade was happening here. A lot of mansions, originally built in the Gothic and Renaissance style, were remodeled in neoclassical style in the late 18th, early 19th centuries, but throughout the time, this place continued being the heart of Przemysl. And the bell tower of the Catholic cathedral. The town looked beautiful yesterday night, so if you have time, I'm gonna send you the links to the recordings tomorrow, later today, or tomorrow when I'm back home from this trip. And if you're interested in seeing this town by night, you're gonna have a link to the recording. The place to buy ice cream. Lody means ice cream. The town hall, built in the neoclassical style in the 19th century and decorated with the emblem of the bear, of course the bear. And the fountain with the bear. And we know that the bear is the symbol of Przemysl. And from here, I'm gonna keep your attention for about 5 more minutes. We are getting to the Sand River, and we're gonna finish our tour on the bank of the Sand River, because the river is a very important part of the local history. The statue to the king and to the #1 poet, writer, and national hero, Adam Mickiewicz. So in the Middle Ages, that river, which you're gonna see over there in a few seconds, served as the border of the town. In the 19th and 20th century, it divided the town into the two parts as Przemysl expanded onto the left bank of the Sand River. On September 1st, 1939, the Nazi Germany invaded Poland, and although the locals didn't expect that to happen so fast, but on September 8th, 1939, the Nazis were already here. And at first, both banks of the Sand River became occupied by the Nazis. All of the town became occupied by the Nazis. Quite a lot of locals, including the local Jews, and around the same time, the local population, 30% of the local population consisted of the Jews. So a lot of them fled east towards Lvov. Wood is one of the main goods traded from here. The trunks of the fir trees from the Carpathian Mountains on both sides of the border, and a lot of illegal wood cutting has been happening in western Ukraine for quite a long time. So at the start of the war, a lot of residents of Przemysl fled east towards Lvov. But then that part of eastern Poland, including Lvov, became occupied by the Soviets on September 17, 1939. And quite a few of them returned to this town. Later in September, by the end of September, the treaty was signed between the Soviets and the Nazis, which became known in history as the Ribbentrop-Molotov Act. And according to that treaty, the Sand River here, and you're looking at the river right now, served as the border between Przemysl and the right bank occupied by the Nazis, and the left bank occupied by the Soviets. And a lot of parts of the Sand River served as the border between occupied by the Nazis Poland and occupied by the Soviets Poland. And between 1939 and 1941, those Jews who wanted to escape the Nazis, they would cross this river and escape to the left bank. To the left bank, which was occupied by the Soviets. They were hiding in the Carpathian Mountains, in the hills of the Carpathian Mountains over there, and that's how a few of them survived the war. So this was the border between the right bank which belonged to the Nazis, and the left bank, which belonged to the Soviets. And then on June 22nd, 1941, the Nazi Germany crossed the river and invaded the USSR and the territory of Poland, which had been occupied by the Soviets. And that was basically the next stage of the Second World War. Still today, when you are in Przemysl, you can visit one of those wartime bunkers, which is called the Molotov-Ribbentrop bunker, built along the border during the wartime. It's one of the major sites of this town. So, and this is the end of our walk. If you have time, I look forward to seeing you here more. 9 a.m. American East Coast time, 6 a.m. American West Coast time, 3 p.m. local time. You have the link. That's going to be the final tour. The final tour of Przemysl. There are two historic bridges here. This one, which during the wartime and at the beginning of the 20th century was more of a pedestrian bridge. And the second historic bridge right there, which was built by the Austrians in the late 19th century as the railroad bridge. So when Poland was partitioned and this region became part of the Austrian Empire, at first the Austrians didn't invest anything into Eastern Poland because it was on the borderline with the Russian Empire, a risky area. And only in the second half of the 19th century, the industrialization started. And as part of the process, the Austrians built the railroad, which connected Vienna with Krakow, Krakow with Lvov, which is for the, or Lviv, which is for the east, and it went through Przemysl. And it was very important for this region because it finally boosted business and trade. So the first railroad bridge, which looked a little bit different, but the outer part of that bridge is pretty much restored original bridge built by the Austrians. The middle part has been built recently to expand that bridge during the current war in Ukraine because it's used to deliver all different goods to Ukraine from here. So during the wartime, these were the two bridges which connected the two banks of the river. So at first, when the Nazis occupied Przemysl, things were a little bit quiet for the Jews. Then the Nazis left the left bank, that bank, and the right bank became part of the occupied by the Nazis Poland and this town. And once this happened, the Nazis ordered about 7,000 of the local Jews living on the right bank to relocate to the Soviet territory. And they gave them pretty much 1 day. And the railroad bridge got closed for the Jews. The only bridge they could use, 7,000 people, was this pedestrian bridge. And things became very chaotic. Families were torn apart. People were trying to escape. The Jews had to leave the right bank within 1 day. Many of them were crossing this river, walking on foot. And then in June 1941, the Nazis crossed the river and started the war against the USSR. And they got both of the banks of Przemysl. The ghetto was founded on the right bank, right there, in 1942. A few months later, after its foundation, after its establishment, it got walled off, and the ghetto was here up until January 1944. The first major deportations for the Jews started in summer 1942, and during one of those major deportations, two Nazi military officials, the military governor of Przemysl and his deputy, blocked that railroad bridge, which served as the biggest and the most important access to the Jewish ghetto of Przemysl, to prevent the Jewish deportation. The deportation was carried out by the SS. They blocked the two Nazi German commanders, the military commander of this town and his deputy, blocked that bridge, and they evacuated hundreds of Jewish forced laborers who worked for Wehrmacht, for the Nazi German army here in Przemysl, together with their families. Of course, later, they were investigated and somewhat persecuted, and even like for a brief time arrested by the SS officials and the top Nazis. But after the Second World War, they were recognized by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations for evacuating, for saving 100 Jewish forced laborers together with their families. And that was an unprecedented act which happened here in Eastern Poland when two Nazi military people, the military governor of the town and his deputy, blocked the bridge and didn't let SS units into the ghetto until they evacuated at least 100 Jews out of the ghetto. And now it's the end of our tour, so thank you so much for joining me here. Thank you so much for staying longer and for staying up late. I look forward to seeing you here more. Thanks again. Sleep well and bye for now.